America is a nation that is believed to grant each of its citizens with freedom and equal opportunity. Despite the fairness that this nation supposedly promotes, one major area of controversy is the influence of racism within its criminal justice system. The concept of racial profiling is outraging people who believe underlying racism and prejudice against minority groups fuels racial disparities in police stops and arrests. The concept of racial profiling refers to a form of discrimination by which law enforcement uses a person's race or cultural background as a primary reason to suspect an individual of committing a crime. There are multiple theories regarding the causes of racial profiling. In order to understand racial profiling, it is vital to recognize the trends in American history that contribute to the targeting of minority groups.
The reality is that racism is embedded within the foundation of American culture. African Americans were once slaves in America, demoted as lower beings due to their skin color. After the abolishment of slavery, African Americans continued to face discrimination and segregation in a society fueled by white supremacy. Various acts of racism were supported in the Jim Crow era. Jim Crow began as a derogatory slang term for black man. In a formal sense, it evolved into a racial caste system promoting white supremacy that dominated society until the mid-1900s. The Jim Crow laws were a series of formal laws and regulations that established different rules for blacks and whites, such as segregation of public institutions. Jim Crow laws advocated anti-black racism and legalized practices to support it. Thus, Jim Crow left a legacy of bias that continues to divide nation by race.
There are various areas in the criminal justice system in which racial profiling and racial disparities occur. Many ask why racial disparities in police stops are persisting despite a widespread legal and moral commitment to non-discrimination. America's history of racism is believed to contribute to the current racial issues in the criminal justice system. Whether due to conscious prejudice or unconscious bias, minority groups are being disproportionately targeted for acts of deviance in society compared to other races. Institutional racism refers to the policies and practices in prisons or other systems that create conflicting treatment of a targeted inmate group. Training and policy in contemporary policing makes it more likely that officers will act on the bias of bigotry or implicit stereotypes, resulting in racially disparate outcomes. Evidence supports that race is a factor with arrests and incarceration. The black incarceration rate for the third strikes law is 12 times higher than that of the incarceration of whites. Blacks, Native Americans, and Latinos are disproportionately represented by population within the U.S. prison system.
Police stops convey powerful messages about citizenship and equality. How should people react when there are notable racial imbalances in the types of people most targeted? The police make some 18 million traffic stops per year in the United States. Nationally, 12% of drivers are stopped per year by police. There are growing accounts of African Americans who claim to have been subject to intrusive and arbitrary inquiries when stopped compared to Caucasians. 24% of people of racial minorities are subject to police stops. The Justice Department statistics note that a black driver is about 31% more likely to be pulled over than a white driver, or about 23% more likely than a Hispanic driver. As a result, for many citizens, driving while black is considered a risk. Many police stops occur because suspects appear suspicious for superficial and stereotypical reasons. These acts fuel minority groups' distrust in law enforcement, and as a result, police stops are recreating and enforcing America's racial divide.
African Americans represent only 13% of the United States population and 14% of regular drug users, but they account for 37% of those who are arrested for a drug offense. Over 60% of individuals in prison for a drug offense are from the communities of color. This disparity is greatly due to the differences in drug law enforcement, racial profiling by local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, and increased rates of conviction for minorities.
A 2014 study in New York City showed that blacks were more likely than whites or non-black minorities to be in jail while they await trial, even after controlling for the seriousness of charges and prior record. The temporary incarceration stigmatizes the defendant, disrupts family life and employment, and makes it harder for the defendant to prepare a defense.
Police are 3 times as likely to search the cars of stopped African Americans than stopped Caucasian drivers, as the chart below, based on data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, illustrates. African Americans serve close to the same amount of time in federal prison for a drug conviction as whites do for a violent offense. African American drug defendants have a 20% greater chance of being sentenced to prison than their white counterparts.
A vicious cycle of prejudice and rejection causes negative outcomes. Rejected from the social and economic structure of American society, many young black males attempt to meet society's culturally defined goals and the masculine model of manhood by turning to the alternative underground economy of drugs. As the incarceration rate for drug offenders skyrocketed, the young black male population was particularly affected. These social and economic factors have produced a negative image of black males as the universal boogeyman within American culture. In order for America to promote genuine equality and peace, it is vital to recognize the existence of racism within the criminal justice system and work together as a nation to stop it.